Alright, hello there, we're online. Welcome to today's stream, where we're taking images out of Midjourney and placing them into Blender using the Perspective Plotter plugin in order to start creating a 3D scene out of that Midjourney image. There's a lot to cover on Midjourney, especially with the recent development on Midjourney 5. So there's a lot that this session won't be able to contain to fully explain everything that Midjourney can do at this point, especially on the iterative process to create images. So we'll just quickly, take a look at some tools to create a prompt within Midjourney, as well as using ChatGPT to create these prompts, bring an image over into Blender, and then start building out this 3D scene. So we'll get right into it. This website is linked down in the description below. It's a really useful GitHub page set up here by the sponsor, Will Wolfgen. Will Wolfgen, there we go. So over here on styles, we have different sort of guides depending on what it is that you want to look into for that specific session or specific prompt generation. So structural modification, geometry, perspectives, objects, shaders, etc. There's different comparison pages here, so you can click on any one of these and look into, different setups on how different prompts that have been successful, tested by other people, sort of put together in one place, so you can understand what it is that the prompts really do or how they get influenced, right? And beyond what Midjourney provides in their guides, you can actually see, for example, if we were to go into, let's go into geometry. So we could see under Midjourney version 4, oops, I mean to click there. All right. This is an error, I was just on your site. Here. We got that would be interesting if in the middle of this stream I got kicked off or they added more restriction to the site. I was just using this. This is interesting. Maybe it's because I linked it into the stream and there's something in the terms and conditions I might have overlooked. I don't think so. Well, that's a shame. If you're watching, you can take a look at the description and click that link. See if you're able to access that. But anyway, my other approach, which I was going to go over after reviewing some of this information, is actually using ChatGPT to create your prompts. So for example, if we were to go over here, and I already fed it basically everything that Midjourney has on its prompt notes. So everything that is on the website, just paste it in here and have Midjourney understand, or have ChatGPT understand what it is that, or how it is that Midjourney works. And with that, keeping in mind the parameters set out by Midjourney on their guide, what sort of images do we want to get. So we have a few scenes I want to get through, but we'll focus in on one, which is a perspective view. So we can say create a prompt for Midjourney, the previous considerations. To yield a conceptual city of a dystopic future. I feel like I'm going to misspell dystopic here. Ah, I did it. Of the city of Genoa. What else can we add here? Let's go with that. Let's just give it more freedom. So we'll give that a minute to generate. Time. I wonder if because this GitHub might have gotten so popular, restricted the access status. Alright, we'll take our previous prompt, generate a, so we'll take out the command because we don't need to put that in for Midjourney. So we can start with a futuristic cityscape set in a dystopian future version of Genoa. So the first thing that you put in for your prompt is essentially going to drive what it is that the Midjourney is going to prioritize, right? So in this case, it's going to focus on an environment, and then it goes into detailing on what that subject is. So where towering skyscrapers made of stacked container modules dominate the skyline. So what's cool here is, since I'm using all these images to generate different scenes for a comic book, we can actually see I'm able to keep some continuity in the environment by the prompts that I already started off with. So that's actually something I had specified in a previous prompt. Interesting. The streets below are filled with trash, debris, and remnants of old buildings that were swallowed up by the new structures. Perfect. So it is following in line, even though I asked it for something a bit more vague than previously. It is filling in information from the previous prompt I set. And it is more, something that you don't typically see in Midjourney is people being grammatically correct. However, it actually is within the guidelines of Midjourney to be grammatically correct, at least in these phrases that you're putting in between commas. So we also have another phrase here for show the interplay between the stark utilitarian containers and the decaying remnants of the past. Emphasize the contrast between the cold metallic structures. So it's actually even informing it on what it is that we want to get stylistically, right, for this scene. I'm just going to add in a few things at the end. So something that's popular to do is Octane render. I mean, there's Octane, Redshift, Unreal Engine. A lot of people do things, but we could do Octane, and then I'll do Unreal Engine, just because Blender, I find, is more cartoonish, at least in the way that the AIs produce images, inspired by Blender, even though Blender kind of do a lot of things. Maybe it's because of how the models are built up, or the popularity of why people pick one software or another. But we'll go ahead and put that through to Midjourney. Job action restricted. Oh. Okay. So I was hoping I didn't have to do this on stream, but I am going to need to subscribe real quick. I plan on doing it anyway, but I was hoping I could still use trial. But we'll go ahead and actually, while I'm doing this over here, we'll plug in that same prompt into Blue Willow, just so we can also get comparisons. I like to use more than one image generator when going through and creating different concepts, just so I can actually vet, you know, the process that I'm using or the tool that I'm using for that specific type of image. So we'll have Blue Willow while I quickly solve this Midjourney hurdle. So another thing with prompts, you are able to put in commands. So if you look into the FAQ, and if you're not familiar with Discord, once you join in a server, you have some channels on the left hand side, and you're able to look into not only what other people are saying in terms of like what's working and what's not working, but typically there'll be commands that you can type in to modify a prompt. So for example, saying no to eliminate something out of an image, or several other considerations. So this isn't bad. Typically to save an image here, before we want to save it, we want to be able to create some variants or upscale an image that we like, that we see here. I'm kind of leaning towards the top left. The reason for that is the ground plane is more or less eye level. So the process in which I'm going through to do this in Blender, because I'm using the perspective plotter plugin, we do want to pick something that could have been taken by a camera. So that is key for this part of the process. Of course, again, there's a lot of ways to Midjourney and a lot of different ways to be able to create a 3D scene from a 2D image. But the way I'm going through it with that plugin, something that's more closer to the ground or more eye level, could have been taken by a camera, is optimal for this part of the process. So I'll go ahead and create variations on that first one, and similar to Midjourney, here we can upscale the first one, and I'll also create variants on it. So here we have our image, and we want to open it in the browser so that we can then right click, save image as, save it wherever it is I'm going to go put it. We'll save this image here, and I'll call this Blue Willow test 1. And we'll see what variations we got. So I'll leave it up to the chat here. So we have on the top left number 1, on the top right number 2, on the bottom left number 3, and on the bottom right number 4. So if you have any preference, I'm going to give just a few seconds here to see if anyone in the comments wants to give vote in. And yeah, at the end we'll kind of compile quickly some of these images, and we'll put together sort of a selection and then choose one for the 3D scene. So I'm going to give just a little bit of a moment over here if anybody wants to chime in on the chat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Number 4. Hey Albert, thanks for chiming in. Glad to see you here, man. All right, number 4, that's what we got in. So we're gonna go ahead and upscale our number 4. Give that a second. All right. Save that. Oh, open a browser, and then after opening a browser, right click, save image as. And we'll put that in the same place. We'll put Blue Willow test 2. Cool. All right. There's actually a lot of depth in this one. It's like a layer on the city above the city below. So that'll be interesting. I'm not sure how that'll work out, but it'll be interesting to test. We'll do one that'll be good proof of concept, and I am interested in seeing sort of how the plugin would react to that sort of 2 levels of ground plane. Alright, you should be able to go back to Midjourney now and put in that same prompt. So I think I'm still able to use this channel. So our imagine command, paste in here. Oh, that's my directory. We'll bring that prompt back over from, where do we have it? ChatGPT. Okay, we'll bring that prompt back over just to compare exactly what the same prompt does in Blue Willow compared to Midjourney. Imagine. And while we wait, we go through this process and wait a little bit. If you want to include any comments in the any questions in the comments, take 2. If you would like to put any questions in the comments, I'll be checking regularly because there is some lull or some time between having to create one image and another. I'll showcase. Here, we'll go to General Image Gen. I wonder if there's a character cap I'm unaware of here. Application did not respond. Let's maybe ask ChatGPT to shorten that prompt because it is really long. Shorten the prompt. Half its length. Alright, and pretty much the same thing. We'll take out the create in the beginning. And if this doesn't work again, then I'm glad I had a backup. Can't believe that link even failed on me. The application did not respond. I've tested this session for the past like 2-3 days, and now that I'm live, it doesn't work, of course. So I'm sure I'll revisit this whole topic again, but at least we had a backup in this themed image gen. Maybe if I go into environments. The application did not respond. It's not liking me today, guys. So sorry. So we'll have to rename this session Blue Willow in Blender. And then we'll compare it to a Midjourney in Blender. So with those two images, let's go ahead and get started with our session here. I also see that, alright. I'm going to bring back my images. Image as. Why did it not save? Oh, I know why. Having a, oops, a little bit of an issue here. There we go. Save image as. All right, just that. Okay. We're gonna try yours, Albert. We're gonna bring this one into Blender using the Perspective Plotter plugin. So the first thing we want to do when we bring in this image, we're basically gonna build this 3D world all based on this one image, right? So we're gonna delete everything as we do, and bring in a camera. And over on the object properties, we're gonna turn this down to 0, 0, and 90. So we have here our x-axis and our y-axis, and we have our camera aligned here with the y-axis. What we want to do is actually put in 45 for our z-axis. So we have the camera working with the two axes, looking in different directions there. So with that, we'll go into the camera properties over here on the bottom right and go to background images. For background images, we'll add in our image here that we generated with the AI. Image generator with Stable Diffusion or whatnot, in this case Blue Willow. Okay, and if we look through the camera, we have our image, right, set up as a background for that camera. But what we want to do now is change the proportions of the camera so that it fits the image rather than the image fitting the proportions of the camera. So for that, that's where we start using our Perspective Plotter plugin. So I can see it now because I'm in the camera view. If I exit the camera view and I click out of that plugin, it's not there anymore. So it only works within the camera view. That's mainly how we're going to be working for building this out at the beginning. So it says right here, background unmatched. So we're going to click there. And now we have our square camera matching the image that's set up as a background. Now we have here plot perspective. And in the past, I've shown how to use 2 vanishing points. In this case, I'm going to use 3 vanishing points just because there's a lot of verticality in this image. So having that third axis for the Z will actually help to make sure that that geometry is right. So we'll hit plot perspective and we get our 3 different sets of lines here. So we got 2 for the X, 2 for the Y, and 2 for the Z. So we want to match this to overall lines that we see in this scene, and we want to have the X and the Y lines, the red and the green lines, match up together as much as possible. We can do the X-axis over here, and we can kind of guesstimate how that base of the building runs that way. And so you see what's going on here is I'm not sure how well this is transmitting on the stream. I'll add in a cube. So there's a cube. And as I move the perspective, you can see the cube is being distorted, match whatever it is that I'm doing over here. So I'll bring this line down, match with in here, and this one to match with the other. Okay. Oops. Oh, I hit undo and it just went away. There we go. So there we have our 2 y-axis, and now I can correct my z's. So top of the tower to the base, the edge of this tower to the value. I'm going to take a little bit of tweaking here. There we go. It is a very far away shot. So very important to take a look at the relationship you have between the X and the Y axes. And this should be looking like a cube. So fidget around. I think I have to maybe pull this Y axis closer to camera. There we go. So the better you can make a footprint of a cube in perspective view, the better that's going to work. I'm having to really sort of just guess how this y-axis is. I'm kind of making an imaginary bridge over here. Okay, there's our z's, and there is our x and our y. And our cube basically fits. If I move the cube around, you know, it shouldn't look too awkward. Like, I should be able to fit this cube onto the faces of the different geometries. So if I move it over to this corner, I can kind of see these lines are pretty much matching up with how that tower shapes up. And if I move it now down the x-axis over to where that tower is, should be seeing that cube match the faces or the sides of that tower pretty good. And it is. It's decent. Like if I were to stretch this vertically, you see the top disappear just like it is in the perspective. There is one step I haven't taken care of though, which is our ground plane. And that's the part that's a little bit tricky with this one because we have two ground planes. So I'm going to click this origin point. So when you're in the perspective plotter plugin and through the camera view, you can drag your origin point around. And we want to set that so that our grid lines basically lining up at the ground level. Which in my case, the ground level will actually be this mid floating level. Which actually, if I have the green axes are moving out into the distance as it should. So if I bring this line a bit closer, a bit down lower. Okay, this is good enough to start working with. So we have our perspective line set up and we have our image set up as a background. So the next thing we'll start doing is actually using these cubes to mimic these buildings. So we can use SX to start scaling, then GX, GY, begin moving this object. We can tab into it and get into face mode over here so that we can move this face up, extrude it, and yeah, just basically start around. Rather than do what I just did there, which was orbit around to select that back face, it does help a lot to work in wireframe. Although I'm not sure with the photo and with the dark lines how well you're able to see this on stream, but you know, you can pick through the object there and we can put that back. Keep trying to just pan without holding shift fast enough. If you're wondering why I keep accidentally orbiting. Okay, so we'll move. There we go. Check that there. We can add in another cube. And as I'm placing these cubes, I know it's not the most fascinating thing to be looking at. So if you want to drop in any questions at this time or any little comments over there, definitely welcome. So sometimes you'll see, this is the thing with AI generated images, is sometimes as it would be showing up in a camera, right? Like we're looking down and we have our ground plane down here, and you know, we should be seeing this line up with the edge of the cube, and it's kind of like a forced perspective situation. You have to take this edge down in order to meet, you know, what's kind of going on here. Or am I not sure if it was generally a forced perspective, but it's an AI generated image. So even though to the eye, you know, and in the way that if it's a wide angle, for example, the plugin does pick up on like field of view, but depending on the AI decides to how the AI decides to generate the image, it's not like a perfect photograph, right? Where all the perspectives will match every single axis. So don't worry if as you start putting out these cubes, you realize like, oh, that top isn't actually flat, or the top of the cube isn't actually flat. And I did a pretty decent job of setting my perspective. Don't sweat it too much, because at the end of the day, this is basically a machine dreaming, right? So We'll plug this now over here, match that perspective there. And what's helpful, I mean, most of the stuff that you can do with this process of starting from an image to generate a 3D scene, generally you totally spaced out there. Generally, you want to set up your faces and everything to match the depth in the scene and whatnot, and everything's going to be relating to the camera view. However, if you switch over to a top view and you look at the placement of those buildings, it kind of makes sense, right? Like if I go back into camera view and if I hit a plane, it's not like totally distorted. If you're not exactly sure what I mean by that, is sometimes when you're working from the perspective of the camera, you're exaggerating things, or you might be placing things in a way where the dimensions or the scales don't really make sense. I mean, for starters, dimensions here don't really play a role. I'm trying to match this ground plane over here to the plane that I have. And what we're really looking for is proportion. And if you take a look at, for example, the CG scene for Into the Spider-Verse movie, what they did, they really distorted the buildings to really emphasize their verticality and emphasize the drop that the main character does. So that could be something that could, what you're making could end up looking something like that. But ideally, depending on your situation, you might want to be able to use different views out of this one scene or continue to build it out. Right? So that would essentially mean that you want to keep checking to see if from the top view these proportions make any sense, so that if I were to project those textures onto these buildings, you can see like my ground plane is way floating down there. I have to see here in wireframe, my buildings are too tall or my ground plane is too low. I'm going to call my ground plane too low. So the bottom of the buildings aren't all the same either, so that's something that maybe could be considered as well. We can just kind of take the liberty of raising one level of this building over here. Like if I take this face now and delete that face, I can create a different rectangle for that plane there, so it means it'll be a little bit lower. So you start to rationalize a little bit what it is that the AI did, right? So that if I project these textures onto it and say I wanted to grab a view from here, obviously this isn't from where we're going to be using the towers or the buildings, but if I apply that building or that architectural style all around the building, I can get more out of this scene if things proportionally look like they make sense, building off of the perspective. Okay, I'll create a plane there for that building right here. And I'll actually go to my side view. Oh, that was way off. I'll go to my side view to place it just somewhat underneath there. There we go. And we'll move this over, it out. And we can actually see the bottom of this plane. I mean, we sort of can on this other one as well, but I'm not going to keep up with that too much right now. Screw this in the Z-axis. And maybe just this face as well, screwed in the Z-axis. I don't want to sink it down, but I can sink it down there, get more detail into it later. Go to edge mode, alt-click. Alt-click should be selecting all the perimeter edges, but it's selecting this perimeter instead. I'll just go ahead and select all these different faces here, or these edges, right-click, and we can do fill. We get a face right there. Okay. I mean, we can do something for that. We could add in a sphere and move it way out into the background. It's like there. And distort it, maybe like distort it just in one axis and then rotate it on the other axis, get it to match. It has a little bit of a tilt as well. Okay, So we have our base plate basically set up, and what I mean by that is we have our ground plane geometries, we have our main environment geometries, we have a vehicle even, and we want to start detailing this. Oops. Hit Control S there by reflex. I always want to save. We have our main elements set up, so now what we want to do is we want to start projecting the image that we generated from the AI onto this geometry. So it's kind of like there's another process which is making a depth map or a height map, if you're familiar with what that is. But for this one, it's kind of like not truly using fully the AI image to create a mesh in order to create the scene, but actually use the AI image to create depth and create a 3D scene, but actually set it up where we can go into further and further detail rationalizing this image and actually create 3D assets that we can later use. So we'll go into material preview so we can see what we do material wise. We'll select all of our geometries and we'll hit Control A to apply all transforms. Pretty sure that applied to all of them, but I might have to do this individually. I'm just gonna go ahead and do that now so we don't run into things later. All right, we applied all our transforms. Now we want to create a material. So go over into our shading editor, have our geometries. We'll still look through our camera, and we will create a new material for this object. And automatically it's a principled SDF, which is fine. What I'm actually going to do is something I could in post add to the description of this video or as a comment, but I do have, we're going to bring in an image, bring in the AI image as a texture, but I just remembered I do have a resource here, is a material, which is a picture to material. And I tried to find this again after showing it off, and I wasn't able to find it at all. But by appending that material here, called wood, and it shows up as purple because we don't have an image selected yet. We take a look at how this shader works out, and it's a custom shader made by somebody. Again, I'll try again to track this down, but I spent I think like 2 hours trying to find the creator of this one thing. So it's picture to material. We can put in an image, we can essentially set up a displacement, normals, reflection, and it's reading excuse me, the picture as sort of like a 3D, trying to interpret it in 3D in order to make sense of it. So we can bring out even more details out of the image by creating some displacement. We'll see what that looks like in just a second. First, we'll select our image here. And there's a scratches material here. We don't need imperfections, not in this case. And it looks a little weird, right? It's wrapping that image all around that cube. But what we want to do is tab into it. We go into edit mode, hit A to select everything. And then we're going to do U, project from view. All right, so it looks a little bit weird. Let's do unwrap first and then do project from view. Okay, it looks weird because it actually doesn't work with whatever's outside of the camera view. So because the building extends beyond the camera view, we're getting like some weird tiling of the image outside of the camera. You project directly from the camera view. Another bit of weirdness that we're getting here is it's sort of distorted on the geometry, and that's because our geometry doesn't have many faces. The more faces that our geometry has, the better it's able to project different tiles of the image onto the actual building. We got something going for us here, but we go over to our modifiers tab and we add in some subdivision, set that to simple, put it up to 5. You could already see there the texture sort of snapped. If I go back, you see there that's no subdivisions, right? Level 1, things straighten out. Level 2, kind of details or tweaks a little bit. And then if we turn it up, it gets sort of more and more defined. So we don't need to actually apply that onto the geometry at the moment. We'll go ahead and now apply this texture to all the other objects. So select all our other objects. Select this tower last and do Control L, link materials, then tab when everything is selected, hit A, U, then project from view. And now we've projected all those things onto geometries. What's going on here with the ground plane? unwrap, project from view. So I think it's because of the subdivision, we have this much, we have a lot creeping up. So again, we'll select everything and then we'll select this tower we set up first. We do Control L again, and this time we do copy modifiers. So we're bringing in that subdivision into all these different objects. I'm going to hit apply for this ground plane, and when I tab in, we see we now have a grid over this whole thing. And we'll try this project from view once again. There we go. So we can start to fix how this image gets projected onto these geometries just by starting to add some detail to the geometries. Ideally, we would do that as cleanly as possible for the topology so that we can continue to push and pull things on the image and continue to generate from there. So we actually see here I can really undo steps, or I applied the modifier on this one. Here we go. Just because I want to go into edit mode here and peel this edge back. There we go. I didn't realize all that was void. So we can go into wireframe and make sure that our edges are lining up as they should. Then just go ahead and do both ground planes together. Take a moment here just to kind of clean up angle. We haven't applied the subdivider yet, so we can also use Control R to start adding in some loop cuts, create some more faces like this one, extrude down. And how detailed you get with this, it's totally up to you. I can add a belt there and then scale it in. Alt click could be giving me this whole loop, but it's not. I'll just select that face that I extruded and move that over. Maybe bring it up, match that face as much as possible. So cool thing is, like, once we actually get into the parameters now of this picture to material thing, we could see actually how much detail we should be concerned with in order to get our scene. Scale this in, that's nice. Again, as I clean up, not a lot coming from me here. You can come up with something to say, but if y'all watching have any questions at the moment, or any suggestions as for this part of the process to go smoother, we welcome that too. Looks like a bridge. I'm actually going to need to cut this. I totally screwed myself here with the topology, but we'll just cut here so we can scale it. Yeah, I don't want that edge way out there. Let's reel this back in. So, closer. This whole face actually comes down. This vertex on here should be somewhere over here. Yeah. You can add a loop cut over here, or just cut with a knife. Like there. Top view. There we go. Giving myself more flexibility here. Okay. Totally awful topology here. But I'll add in a duplicate for the subdivision and do Catmull Clark. If I decrease my simple subdivisions, I increase my Catmull Clark subdivisions, I start getting smoother geometry, which can help for rounder parts of the model. Okay. Fill that down even further, so that fit. There we go. Just loop cuts, add different edges. Gotta have everything fit that. Okay. Now we have two edges here. The round edges are easy to keep track of because they're round. So I have to expand these harsher edges or sharper edges in order to make those round edges meet geometry. Okay. What am I doing? I'm looking at the round edges. Here we go, so we get a bit of a straight line there. That up. Not so much. Right there. Add another loop cut here. Okay. See how that's looking. We go back to material preview, and obviously it looks totally messed up because we have to tap into it, hit A, and reproject our image. So every time we make that many tweaks to it, we have to reproject so that it applies properly. So all this weirdness is actually the picture to material tool. So if we go down here and we tweak the displacement, we see that that's actually the displacement. So it's like cutting into it a lot. And because it's probably also very reflective, yeah, there it is, or not very rough, we are getting a lot of reflection there. We can tweak reflection and we can tweak smoothness or roughness separately. If you really want to take this a step further, you could duplicate this material and actually consider, use the whole image, but actually start to tweak for each building or for each surface the different material properties through this thing here. I want to add more cuts right here, so let me actually looking at that in wireframe. Go. So I'll add a cut for this little building here. This is a 2D surface, so I'm not going to concern myself just yet with shooting in 3D that surface there, but things like this is a building. It has a bottom portion down there. We can go into the camera settings if you're having trouble seeing the image at any point, and if we go back down here to background images for the camera settings, there is an opacity setting here, so we can turn the opacity up all the way. Like here in this darker region, I could see that there's a bottom edge here. I think no, I totally missed what's actually over here. Okay. Yeah, let's see how that's doing when I project texture from the view. Okay, that's fitting a bit better. And yeah, again, it's like the more detail you start putting on the geometries, the better this is going to come out. So if I were to quickly do the tower, this is a round tower. So I'd actually want to, that top surface and bring it down to where this main tower splits off into smaller towers right there, and we have our normal subdivision. We'll duplicate that as well for this one. Do the Catmull Clark, get round edges, lower our, here we go, not so much, well, we could lower our simple that much if I want it to be that round, but in order to plane out that bottom, we want to tab into this, go to edge mode, alt click on the bottom right here. Not cooperating, so I'll just hold shift and click all the edges here to get that face. And if we hit N, we get different properties here. So at the very top for the item, we can see we have a bevel. So we can set up, not a bevel, crease right under it here. So we can take this value up and create a clean crease. There we go. You see, if I zoom in right here and I increase the edge data here for the crease, it's flattening out at the bottom, right? It goes from this like round sort of egg bottom to just a flat. So I could see that I actually want to move all these a little bit lower and scale this up a little bit. Okay. Then I can do the same for the top. So that's fitting the edge rather nicely. And the reason why I wanted to stop here is because I can now start adding loop cuts vertically to split off these other pieces. So I can line that up to this edge right here. Now I have this face and this face separately. So if I were to do this face first, because it is, you know, mostly that whole tower, although I guess I want to split it off here as well. Kind of like reverse engineering architecture from an image. Extrude this middle face now. And it actually gets smaller. And we shift it over so it fits the shape. There we go. Now, loop cuts the other way. Ribbon and wireframe. There we go. And these could be separate objects as well. That would fit the geometry better. Ultimately, I'm not so concerned with being picture perfect. Get it? Because really, I'm using this as a guide for modeling. That's sort of like the point, at least how I go about it here, is to be able to reuse these assets in the future, or to even just take as a process of design, right? Because at the end of the day, almost like when you work from a reference, right, which you always should be doing, you're basically breaking something down visually and then acting on what you're interpreting visually to come up with your own sort of idea. And this is kind of, I think this is pretty similar. You're just skipping a lot of mood boarding and sketching and just going straight to a concept and then starting to model that. So take this geometry now and do our U project from view. And there we go. We've projected. I'm going to turn down the background image all the way so we can really see what's going on with that tower. But we go over here, and there we go. Turn the opacity all the way down. Oh, I stopped short. Let's grab the faces. Not all of those. Come on now. Grab these faces. Back. I realized I've stuck in the shading view. Like, no good reason for that right now. So yeah, we'll move this all the way out of the camera. Go back to A to select everything. U, project from view. Oh, I did stop short for a reason. I don't know why. I thought for a second that tower went all the way through. Bring back our reference image. There we go. I did stop short. I just didn't have to go as tall as I thought I had it. Go. And go preview, tab A, U, project from view. So something's going on here because I am matching. I probably just don't have enough loop cuts on this tower itself. So I have to add one over here. So if I add this loop cut here, you can see it starts to mess with the subdivision of the geometry. I'm gonna just right click so it snaps to halfway the distance to the previous loop cut. Because again, the more cuts you have, the more accurate it'll be to the original image. So I can add a cut here for that piece there, right here. I can go to face mode, alt click to select this belt, and then extrude it and scale it. And I'll show off another method in another session where the way that it becomes modeled is a lot more literal to what you're getting out of the 3D render, or out of the AI image rather. And because here really where you want to end up with this part of the process, or at least like where I see it going, is you end up replacing the image with your own textures. Scale the X, scale Y, up, and continue scaling down. Okay, and another loop cut here, that a bit larger. Okay, material preview, AU, project from view. There we go. So yeah, the more cuts, the more details you're able to add into the model, the better the image will end up fitting to the geometry every time you refit or reproject that geometry or that image. Just speaking a lot today. All right, we'll do project from view. Okay. So the real kicker here is the main character, so to speak, isn't the environment, right? So if I were to say wanted to create a scene like this for a flying car, this is just an environment. I mean, it could be all about the environment, but when you have a low-res environment, you want, like say I were to stop here, like say I were to just make every building look like this building. You can get away with it from the camera view. You could even move the camera a little bit through the scene, right? Or have it pan through the scene, and you can get away with that from the perspective that you're having here. Maybe it's hard to see with the image in the background, but if I hide the image in the background, you can see here like some camera movement and some panning, or even zooming in or dollying in, right? Can be done without totally breaking the effect. But if for that I would put in more time to make more details on the environment, but if I used Blender Kit right now just to bring in a subject, so we'll use Blender Kit to bring in a car. Sure, why not a police? Well, a lot of reasons not a police car, but it's fine. The first thing that popped up. So we'll select this, full hierarchy. No. It's rigged and everything. There we go. We can look like it's flying through like that. Okay. And then we can add some depth of field to the camera itself so that it's focused on the car. And go to the top right over here to enable. We're in viewport shading right now. Fine. I want to turn on. Let's see. We'll get into solid view. And there we go. We can turn on depth of field. We can preview the camera depth of field here without having to render it. Kind of gives us cleaner edges and shows us that we're focused in. But we're focused on the car and we're blurring out the background even at this point. And you might be asking yourself, well, if you're blurring the background and it's all about the subject and you have the background image anyway, why go through this whole process? Why even model this out, right? Thank you, Julian. Appreciate the comment. Love having someone with my same name in the streams. Well, the reason why we might want to build out this whole thing is because, again, it sets the tone for much more detail and having these assets be reusable. But the whole point here too is if I were to add a light into the scene now, right? That's really the benefit of having it in 3D is I can relight this environment not in whatever way I want, because there are sort of shadows, unless the lighting is like really soft from the AI generated image, where you're basically only getting like ambient occlusion, you're only getting these soft edges in between different surfaces, then you can get away with doing, switch over to cycles, then you can get away with doing like really harsh shadows. So we go over to the light properties and we turn down the spread. So it's basically like a spotlight, or we make it a sun, right? And if you start to get these really harsh shadows on something that's soft lit, right, you can basically, use it as a 3D scene. Even so with an HDRI, like if I were now to use Blender Kit to bring in an HDRI, And bring in something like, not that trippy. Yeah. Something like this. Which is a snowscape. Is almost what we have here with our background image. And I do recommend, just to have that lighting match, put in a plane in the background lined up to the camera. I'm gonna do it roughly right now, rotating it this way, and then kind of matching the angle that the camera has here, so that this face can have the background projected onto it. Just so you have that extra level of control over how the background shows up. Same thing here. If I do zero preview, AU, project from view, and assign it the material we created, which is called wood. So it is tricky right now. Let's make that smaller. Rotate up this camera, tab AU, project from view. There we go. And kind of just move it around right now. Matches or hides. Okay. So did our HDRI kick in? It's still downloading. Having a lot of weird issues. Start closing some. That will help. But yeah, we're still downloading our sky dome. Come on now. We go into rendered mode. Say, I mean, it could even seem like a dust scene, right? If I especially were to add a denoiser. Let's add another light. We'll add a sunlight this time, which I guess is a good way to mention this other plugin I recently enabled. I think it's called just Sun Position. It comes with Blender. Go over to the add-ons section and search for sun. And then when you go to your world settings over here, you select your sun object, which is that light I just brought in, the only light here, which is called sun. You can set up latitude and longitude values for that sun. My background image is way too close to camera, casting shadows onto it. We'll move that way back and scale it up, and then reproject. There we go. From view. Back to our sun in our world settings. So you could use a day of the year. So depending on what day, we can see the shadows tweaking right there. Let's look for that sun and make it more intense. There we go. Colors are starting to light up. That looks weird. But yeah, we're mainly zooming in on the effect that this building is having, or this overall. Oh, looks like our HDRI is kicking in now. There we go. So we can see what that looks like with just the HDRI. There we go. Might taking a while. Oh, we'll render this at 30%. Forgot the AI image came out very, very high quality. Not very, pulling me down to be used that image here. So we worked off of that one image and we created this object here, and I can move this tower around, and I mean, now I just created a duplicate because we see the stand in there. But yeah, this becomes an asset you can actually copy through and make a denser city. You can rotate it around. If you're getting something weird like that, you could just go to set origin to center of mass, for example. So it just rotates on the spot. I just lost myself. There we go. I move things around weirdly. Here we go. Yeah, same thing for this one. If we wanted to get that. Put one way out in the background, like perhaps down here. in the bottom level of the city. You know, it tricks the camera pretty well. And we're coming up on an hour now for the stream, so it is quite a process. I mean, I did explain a lot. I haven't just been modeling this entire time, but I've been also my time a little bit. I'll just show you if we were to select this face here, and exactly lined up, like this vertex, and put that in, project. If I select this face to this object, I can now start replacing these different elements with different materials. If I were to stick to just this yellow portion, let's say, create a yellow band, this one here, wireframe view, go, like that edge. Good. If we select this face now, I can go into materials here, add a new material slot, and bring in something from, let's say, Blender Kit, and I do materials, yellow paint. Sure, yellow concrete has a lot of detail in it. That was there. I go to material preview, like this face, and assign that yellow concrete just to that face. Right now we're transitioning in. Once we add enough model detail, and we can start transitioning into bringing other materials to stand in for what the AI image had. I mean, a step further would even be to blend real materials with what the image has on there, but that would be a whole texturing session I'd have to do. That would have to be a separate whole entire thing. But just to get something out of this sequence here, we could do, hold on, we're saving quite a bit. So we can go to our lighting. I'm going to tone down the HDRI to like a 0.1. Go into rendered view, it looks like, and also turn off our background image from the camera. There you go, opacity. Okay, so I toned down the intensity of the environment, like this would be double intensity, do like a 0.1, just to kind of create some really soft shadow. Pick it up to a 0.3. And I chose a soft HDRI on purpose so that I can do my sun settings down here and actually make the sun be the main for lighting here, because it is like a really harsh direct light from the sun, and it just helps to have an HDRI to fill in that soft lighting effect, kind of make it more cinematic and more photoreal. North offset, use refraction, distance. We can set a time of the year or a time of day, so we can see the shadows of the geometries traveling there. And if we do have shadows on our scene, like it looks like if I go over here, we have basically top-down shadows, right? Because we're only getting a little bit of edge lighting on some of these surfaces. So really what I want to do is set this to a noon sun in the month of June, so they get a real overhead lighting, and the lighting in the scene can match the scene in the images. You just do a quick reprojection onto all the geometries. Check from view. Go. Background a little bit. And if we were to just preview quickly to end the session here, what this might look like if we start having the camera move. you know, we can get away with this effect, especially with like sideways panning. Not with the background like that, but the background would have to be built out as a terrain and whatnot to match the image. But yeah, perspective plotter, using AI images to start creating these geometries and be able to use them in 3D to start creating your own assets or start creating your own worlds. We're gonna call that session there. In another moment, I will troubleshoot through the Midjourney thing, and when I do bring in Midjourney, because this was, right, this image was from Blue Willow. Won't give the credit to Blue Willow here. But the next time we bring in Midjourney to create an AI image to bring into Blender, we'll use a depth field or a depth map to basically take an image and convert it into a gradient that informs the 3D surface, how it should deform, so that the things that are further away in the image actually create geometries that are further away and then closer up. It's another technique for different purposes. I think this is more so like skipping the mood boarding and sketching phase to really just getting to like a concept really quick and start modeling it out. Start rationalizing this into something, in this case architectural or environment design. I've done a similar thing with vehicles. You know, you can do that with objects. I think honestly environments might be, unless you have a subject, you know, and all we really care about is seeing this car fly through. Is this car enormous? Oh, it is. So this car should actually be like that big. And we'll move it closer to the camera. Yeah, always check how your geometries are developing in the 3D space. As I started moving the car and I realized that shadow's moving an awful lot. But yeah, and now if we were to move it through the scene, you're gonna be casting shadows onto the building over here as it is. Yeah. Any questions that you might want to throw at my way? Thanks Albert, thanks Julian for the comments. Glad you appreciate this session. It is, I think, definitely an easier way to do it might also not to be 2D, 3D objects, but to do 2D like cutouts. If you're only concerned with like propping up an environment for a subject. But yeah, this is just one technique I've been messing with to sort of get these surreal architectural buildings or start building out this world through conceptual images and then start to create these 3D scenes that I can have characters interact or have vehicles fly through it. Excited to get to the other process and kind of start really tweaking this and comparing what type of images work best with which kind of process or for which use case. Stay tuned for that. If there's no questions in the comments section, bid you all a good night. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's always good to have you. And I'll catch you in the next one. We'll be online tomorrow and we'll be posting what tomorrow's session will be about in the morning. So stay tuned for that as well. Catch you in the next one. Thanks, y'all.